This is the Bizgnus Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
As the U.S. emerges from its worst pandemic in a century, leaders will need to tap their inner resilience to shape their futures and those of their organizations. So says Lisa Koss, co-founder and a partner at the leadership consulting firm Ontos Global in Berkeley. But, she says, leaders should expect a post-COVID workforce that is changed in many respects. Lisa Koss joins us for this Bizgnus podcast. Lisa, by telling our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and your company.
Hi, Doug. Thanks for having me on the show. First of all, I really appreciate that. I'm Lisa Koss. I am a co-founder and principal of Ontos Global. I have been working in the leadership development world, doing, developing, designing, and delivering executive development programs, doing executive coaching, anything kind of leadership oriented, as well as sort of talent management, culture change work for about 25 years, located in Berkeley, California. And although I did spend 20 years in the near Chicago and 20 years in Phoenix. And so and a whole bunch of little moments around the world living in different countries. So I have a very global orientation in terms of the work.
The world, and especially the United States and some Western nations, are finally beginning to come out of this nightmare called COVID-19. And everyone I know hopes that the progress will continue. But now might be a pretty good time for managers and leaders to be thinking about what are we going to do in the post-COVID world. First, tell us what you're hearing from your clients in general, and then perhaps we can go from there and offer some advice for people.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm finding, because I've been doing quite a lot of coaching this year, and what I'm hearing, people are managing it very differently. They're having very different experiences. Some are feeling relatively traumatized. Some of them are feeling happy that this whole thing has happened and they've learned to love working at home. In any case, I have to say that people have been doing quite a lot of change and they have been adapting in the way that they can, some better than others. And so I guess what I would just say is everybody is a unique case, and we need managers at this time very much need to be thinking about how they get informed about how people are doing and really being in conversation with each individual as they move into this post-COVID era.
Question. Give us an example, if you don't mind, of what some people are doing that you are finding innovative in preparing for the post-COVID world.
Yeah, there are a number of people who are renegotiating their roles in terms of how remote they want to stay or don't want to stay. I've talked to salespeople who are literally going out of their mind and really are questioning their entire purpose in the world because they've gotten so much energy and spirit from being in relationship to their customers that without that face-to-face, they're very much suffering. I have other people who are being asked to come back to work who are saying, if they make me come back to work, I'm going to change my employer because my employer is not taking into the account that I have figured out how to redo my life and I like it better working from home. So I'm finding everything with people in terms of what they're coming to and what meaning they're making after this time of trauma. And it has been traumatizing for some. For others, it has been wonderful. It's really interesting, the range of responses. And, I think some of it is just a practical, what's going on in one's life. And so what makes sense, but in other situations, it's really about adaptability. And, adaptive leadership is something that we talk about a lot in our work, which is not necessarily as simple a concept as it sounds, that we just adapt like it's some sort of, learn and grow kind of concept. It's really goes beyond that, actually. But adaptive leadership is a concept that is very much at play about how people are able to be resilient. And that has a lot to do with your emotional constitution, and how many resources you have as an individual, whether they be emotional, psychological, physical, and spiritual ways of dealing with change.
We are talking at this point from let's say, the staff member's point of view. Will I stay? Will I go? Will I work from home or not? What about the employer who says, I can't afford to lose people, and I'm having a hard time recruiting the skilled people that I need? What sort of resiliency do they need? Just to change their thinking, or
Mm,
what?
mm. Well, it's not unlike what everybody's doing, which is needing to adapt to these new times. For the example of the woman who is saying, if they make me come back, I'm going to change employers. It really is about listening to what's going on with each individual, which takes time and it's not easy, but it is about tuning in and to be a leader that does grow and adapt with the times. And this is the moment to really be in tune with all of your employees, and using them, not feeling like as a business owner or a leader of an organization that you have to figure it all out. The good thing about having a group of people who have a point of view is that you can learn from them as well. And so having these conversations, whether they be focus groups or one-on-one conversations with key employees about what ideas they have, could be the way that you share the burden of quote unquote figuring it out. We all have a part of the answer. And I think that when leaders feel like they have to figure out everything by themselves, that's putting, first of all, too much pressure and stress on the individual leader as the person who's got to figure it all out. And it's also not very inclusive, and maybe not even based on what your employees, whatever solution you come up with may not be what your employees are looking for. So, utilize your resource. Another way to have a resource is to recognize that your relationships and your employees are a source of information, and can be supportive in helping figure out what does make sense for the business.
It sounds like what you're saying is that the future of business is going to be radically different than what we're used to. Well, I guess we keep looking back on the industrial age where you had people sitting in desks and you counted noses every morning to make sure everybody was there on time.
Mhm.
Uh, but that must be changing rather dramatically, you think?
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's, depending on the industry and depending on the nature of the work, it does matter. I was talking to a neighbor yesterday who's in the pharmaceutical business, and he was saying that there's just no way to do their certain kinds of work without having a lab. There's a woman who is another woman who's actually in the healthcare field who says, I'm being asked to come back in, but I really don't need to be back in the office. And so what, it depends on the nature of the work for sure. It's interesting. You said counting noses. Um, this week, I've been leading a leadership development program, and it was quite interesting because in the first few minutes of the call, one of our HR sponsors came in and counted noses. Is everybody good? Is everybody here? And so I was a little bit surprised. I mean, maybe that's some sort of hybrid between counting noses, like who's in the room, and counting Zoom participants in a Zoom room.
Counting the Zoom noses, I guess.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
speaking of Zoom, we're using Zoom right now for this interview. But speaking of Zoom and Skype and all the other programs that allow conferencing like this and long distance connections, people are talking about Zoom fatigue, using Zoom lowercase, I guess.
Yes.
How do we deal with that?
Zoom lowercase, kind of like Google. Why don't you go Google that? Why don't you go Zoom that? Right? Interesting. I would expect Zoom to go lowercase for this reason. It's such a popular application. Their profits have skyrocketed in this era. So Zoom fatigue is a real thing. One of the things I've been actually posting a bit on LinkedIn on this topic because I find it to be so important. In leadership development, I think a big topic is the question of energy. and how much energy we have, how we manage our energy, how that connects to the boundaries that we hold as leaders in terms of what we get our fingers into and what we don't. Where we put our energy is everything. And so Zoom is one of these mediums that does require quite a bit, because for the first time ever, people are watching you. They're 3 feet away from your face and they're watching, and you're aware perhaps of your expressions, of your environment, of the dynamic. There's a lot. In a meeting, we might direct our attention to one person, but in a Zoom room, we are looking maybe at 10, 12, 15 people. So we're not only being observed, but we're also observing. And so it can be exhausting. So one of the things that I've advocated and been playing with, which I just did yesterday again, which was when I invited a few people to a call, I said, no video required. Video is a wonderful thing for building relationship, for connecting with others, but I think it also can be overused because people are exhausted. And I think there's a time when you can say, look, we know each other, we have enough context, and so let's just do this. Let's do this one without video. And I think that allows people to have a little privacy and a little time to themselves to regain some energy.
And that is probably going to be extremely welcome.
Yeah, it is. And let's be clear, before every video call, many people have to, think about that. They think about what's in their environment. Where's the dog? Where are the kids? What's going on? Am I going to have a peaceful conversation? So it is nice that if you don't need it, that you actually just say as much. There's no reason to go Zoom call for 10 hours a day, maybe half of them, because it's important. When you're hiring, when you're building relationship, when it's somebody you don't see as often, and then to have a clear agenda and only take the time that you need. But this is a whole nother topic.
Yes, the meetings themselves will probably come back, I guess, and we'll sit around in little rooms and look alert.
Yeah, and I think people are craving that as well. People want to travel, they're ready to see each other, and they're ready to have a personal experience again. And so I relate to that, and I am very much looking forward to being back in the room. I think there's going to be a lot of gratitude with actually getting back into the room with each other and feeling a little bit more connected and community oriented.
Now, where can our listeners and viewers get hold of you?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn, Lisa J. Koss, and you can find me as well at our website, www.ontosglobal.com. Ontos, O-N as in Nancy, T-O-S, Ontos Global.
Anything you'd like to add, Lisa, that we've not had a chance to talk about?
Well, I guess I would just say that I have a brand new book that just came out, and it is on the topic of coaching. And this is incredibly relevant from what our conversation has been today, in this time of reconnecting and seeing where people are as it relates to their experience in this last year and what they're looking for going forward. Having conversations with employees or colleagues, peers, is more important than ever. And I'm pretty sure people have been very, very busy in this last year, figuring out how to get things done in a new way. And so this book is really about how to have a highly productive conversation in a way that's meaningful. It goes deeper. It makes manager coaches out of managers. In other words, how to have a coaching approach to a management conversation, with the idea that understanding where people are, and then how to turn issues and concerns or opportunities into something very productive is I have a groundbreaking model in this book about how to do that. And so it's a 7-step.
Do you happen to have a copy of the book right there?
I do. It's right here. It's called Leading for Learning. And this is not a huge book, not a large book. It's 130 pages. And it's basically a step-by-step, how do you have a conversation where you get after what is motivating people now? How have their values changed now? How can you engage with people so that they can actually be more committed, be more focused, sort of be able to turn this very disruptive time into something that is meaningful, into what the work actually is. So it's an example of how to have that conversation. And there's a very easy to follow model and a lot of examples and stories. And so far it's gotten great reviews, and it just won an award for CEO World magazine for being a best book. So I hope you check it out and leave a review, because if you're interested in having more meaningful conversations in a way that actually makes a lot happen in a shorter amount of time, I would really highly recommend that right now in this time of coming out of COVID.
You've been watching the Bizgnus podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@bizgnus.com. Thanks for watching.